The night was quiet, the kind of silence that made even the softest footsteps sound louder. A cool wind drifted through the trees, rustling the leaves as the moon cast long shadows over the cemetery. It wasn't a place most people would visit at this hour, not unless they had a reason. From the window of his sleek black car, Daniel Carter watched. He wasn't the type to stop for just anything, but something about the lone figure caught his eye. A man, dressed in a worn-out hoodie and jeans, stood near a gravestone, motionless. His shoulders slumped, his hands tucked into his pockets, as if he was carrying the weight of the world on his back. Daniel wasn't sure why, but he felt something stir inside him. Curiosity? Maybe. But it was more than that. He had seen enough in life to know that when a man visits a grave in the dead of night, it's never for no reason. Daniel was a self-made millionaire, wealthy beyond what most people could imagine. His life was filled with luxury, meetings, deals, and people who only spoke to him because of what he had. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, his attention was fixed on the stranger before him. The man knelt slowly, resting a hand on the cold marble headstone. Even from a distance, Daniel could sense the grief. He had seen it before, the quiet kind, the type that didn't need words. The kind that never really leaves. For a moment, Daniel thought about driving away. It wasn't his business. He didn't even know this man. But something about the scene wouldn't let him go. His instincts told him there was more to this than just a midnight visit to a grave. Then the man did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out what looked like an old, crumpled piece of paper. He unfolded it with shaking hands and placed it gently on the grave, as if it held something sacred. Daniel squinted, trying to make out what it was. A letter. A photograph. The man's head dipped low, his fingers tracing the edges of the paper. His shoulders trembled, and in the dim moonlight, Daniel thought he saw tears glistening on his face. And that's when Daniel noticed something else, something that made his heart tighten. The man had a tattoo on his wrist. Not just any tattoo. A number. A sequence Daniel had seen before. It was a prison ID. Daniel's grip on the steering wheel tightened. He knew what that meant. This man had been in prison. His mind raced with questions. Who was he? What had he done? And why was he here, grieving over someone at this hour? But before he could think any further, the man suddenly stiffened. He turned his head slightly, sensing something, or someone, watching him. Daniel held his breath as the man slowly rose to his feet. Their eyes met, and for a split second, neither moved. Then the man took a step back, as if ready to run. But Daniel wasn't about to let this moment slip away. What was this man hiding? And why did it feel like Daniel was about to uncover something that would change everything? The man hesitated for a moment, his eyes locked onto Daniel's. There was something in his gaze, fear, maybe, or something even deeper. Regret, guilt. Whatever it was, it made him look like a man who had spent years running from something, only to find himself trapped by it again. Daniel slowly pushed open his car door, stepping out into the cool night air. He didn't know why he was doing this. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was something more, something unspoken. Either way, he couldn't ignore the feeling that there was a story here, one he needed to hear. The man took another step back, his body tense. "I don't want any trouble," he muttered, his voice rough and tired. Daniel raised his hand slightly, showing he meant no harm. "Neither do I," he said calmly. "I just saw you here and—" He paused, unsure of what to say next. "I just wanted to ask if you're okay." The man let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. "Nobody asks that," he said. "Not to people like me." Daniel frowned. "People like you." The man hesitated again, then looked down at his wrist where the faded numbers of his prison ID were inked into his skin. "Ex-con," he said simply. "People don't care if we're okay." Daniel studied him closely. He wasn't sure what kind of crimes this man had committed, but something told him it wasn't the whole story. He had seen ruthless men before, men who didn't flinch, who carried no shame for what they had done. This man was different. There was a weight on him, something too heavy to ignore. Daniel glanced at the grave. The old crumpled paper still rested on the headstone, fluttering slightly in the breeze. "Who are you visiting?" he asked. The man's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then finally, he exhaled and looked up at the sky, as if searching for the right words. "My brother," he said quietly. Daniel wasn't expecting that. "What happened to him?" Daniel asked carefully. The man looked down at the ground, his fingers curling into fists. "Overdose," he said. "He got mixed up with the wrong people while I was locked up. I should have been there. I should have stopped him." His voice cracked slightly, but he quickly masked it with a sharp breath. "But I wasn't. And now the only thing left of him is a name on a stone." Silence hung between them. Daniel knew he was standing at a crossroads. He could walk away, pretend this was just another stranger with another sad story. Or he could stay, dig deeper, try to understand why he was here, why this moment felt important. The man turned as if to leave, but Daniel spoke before he could. "What's your name?" The man hesitated before answering. "Josh." "I'm Daniel." Josh gave a small nod but didn't say anything. It was clear he didn't expect much from this conversation. Maybe he was used to people turning their backs on him. Then Daniel said something that surprised even himself. "I don't think your brother would blame you." Josh's eyes flickered, something unreadable crossing his face. "You don't know that." "No," Daniel admitted. "But I know what it's like to live with guilt." Josh stared at him for a long moment, then let out a slow breath. "You don't look like someone who's ever had to carry that." Daniel gave a small, humorless smile. Money doesn't erase the past. Josh didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked back at the grave, his face tight with emotions he was trying to push down. "I made a lot of mistakes," he said finally. "I hurt people. Not the way you think, but enough to end up where I did. And now, even though I'm out, it feels like I'm still serving time." He clenched his jaw. "People see the tattoo, and they decide who I am before I even open my mouth." Daniel could understand that, in a way. The world had its way of branding people, of deciding their worth before giving them a chance to prove otherwise. "What if you had a second chance?" Daniel asked. Josh let out a bitter laugh. "Guys like me don't get those." Daniel looked at him thoughtfully. "Maybe they do," he said. Josh met his gaze again, searching for something. Maybe sincerity, maybe a trick. "Why do you care?" Daniel didn't have an answer. Maybe it was because he had built his entire life on second chances, on proving people wrong. Or maybe it was because, deep down, he saw something in Josh that reminded him of himself. Before either of them could say another word, a noise cut through the silence. A car engine. Josh's entire body stiffened. Daniel turned to see headlights approaching from the distance. "Are you expecting someone?" Daniel asked. Josh's face darkened. "No." Daniel didn't miss the way Josh's posture shifted, the way his hands tensed at his sides. Whoever was coming, it wasn't someone he wanted to see. The car rolled to a stop near the cemetery entrance. The engine idled for a few seconds, then cut off. Josh took a step back. "I need to go." Daniel grabbed his arm. "Who is that?" Josh shook his head. "I can't be here when they show up." Daniel didn't know what was happening, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a midnight visit to a grave. There was more to Josh's story, and something told Daniel that whatever was about to happen next, it was going to change everything. Josh's pulse quickened as the car door creaked open. A figure stepped out, barely visible under the dim glow of the cemetery's lamplight. Daniel could feel the shift in the air, something unspoken but heavy. Josh took another step back, his jaw tight. "I have to go," he whispered urgently. Daniel's instincts kicked in. "Josh, wait. Who are they?" Josh didn't answer. His breathing was shallow, his fists clenched at his sides. Whoever was in that car, he didn't want to face them. Then the man from the vehicle took a step forward, and the tension thickened. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes. Even from a distance, Daniel could see the sharpness in his movements, the kind that came with experience, the kind that warned you not to take a wrong step. "Josh," the man called out, his voice rough but controlled. "Didn't think I'd find you here." Josh's whole body tensed. "What do you want?" Daniel glanced between them, the pieces clicking into place. This wasn't just a random encounter. The man let out a low chuckle. "You know what I want." Josh exhaled sharply. "I told you I'm done. I'm not getting involved." The man took another step forward, his expression unreadable. "That's the thing about old debts," he said. "They don't just disappear." Daniel's stomach nodded. He wasn't sure what debt the man was talking about, but he had a feeling it had nothing to do with money. Josh's hands trembled slightly, but his voice stayed firm. "I don't owe you anything. I already paid my price." The man tilted his head. "Your brother didn't think so." Silence. Josh's breath hitched. For a second, his face crumbled before he quickly masked it. But Daniel saw it, the pain, the guilt, the unbearable weight of those words. Daniel stepped in, his voice calm but firm. "Look, whatever this is, it's over. He's not the same guy anymore." The man finally turned his attention to Daniel, as if noticing him for the first time. "And who are you?" "Someone who doesn't walk away when things don't look right." A slow smirk crossed the man's face. "That's cute. But this," he gestured toward Josh. "This isn't your problem." Josh clenched his jaw. "Leave. Now." The man sighed, shaking his head. "I tried to be nice. But since you insist on making things difficult." In one swift motion, he reached into his coat. Daniel's heart pounded. He didn't know what was coming next, but he knew he had only seconds to react. Before the man could do anything, Josh moved. Fast. A burst of adrenaline pushed him forward, shoving the man back just as his hand emerged from his coat. Something clattered onto the ground, a switchblade. Daniel didn't hesitate. He stepped in, kicking the knife away before the man could grab it. Josh grabbed the man by the collar. "I said it's over." His voice shook with something raw, something final. The man's eyes flickered with realization. He had lost. Sirens blared in the distance. Someone must have seen the confrontation and called for help. The man cursed under his breath and pulled away. "This isn't over," he muttered before turning and walking back to his car. Josh didn't move until the engine roared to life and the car disappeared into the night. Daniel exhaled, his heart still racing. What the hell was that? Josh ran a hand over his face, trying to steady himself. "My brother got caught up with them," he said quietly. "They pulled him in, and when I got locked up, I wasn't there to pull him out." His voice cracked. He tried to walk away, but they don't let people go that easy. Daniel understood now. Josh had been carrying more than just grief. He had been carrying blame. "You're not responsible for what happened," Daniel said. Josh let out a shaky breath. "Try telling that to my head." The sirens grew louder. Josh turned to Daniel. I need to go before they get here. Daniel frowned. Why? You didn't do anything wrong. Josh looked at him, something unreadable in his expression. People don't see ex-cons the same way you do. Daniel could argue, but he knew Josh wasn't wrong. I'll be fine, Josh added, a small, almost grateful smile tugging at his lips. Thanks for not walking away. Daniel watched as Josh turned and disappeared into the shadows, his figure blending into the night. The sirens finally reached the cemetery, flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the gravestones. Daniel looked down at the grave, at the crumpled letter still resting on the stone. He picked it up gently. The ink was smudged in places, but he could still make out the words. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me, but I won't stop trying to make things right. Daniel exhaled, setting the letter back down with care. Josh had been running for a long time. Maybe now, for the first time, he could finally stop.